So with Sayara's permission, may we begin? May we begin Hinamizawa's longest day? All right. Sayara's given us permission, everybody. Sayara declareth that Hinamizawa's longest day can now take place. Let us go. It was past midnight, and almost dawn, the very quiet time of night where staying up late and getting up early melded together. That exact thing was happening in the offices of the Okinogi gardeners. There were only 2 people on guard duty, and they were playing cards. They weren't sentries, so they didn't really need to be on guard all the time. However, they weren't allowed to fall asleep either. After the TV broadcast went off the air a little past midnight, they usually ended up playing cards. Suddenly, the phone rang. The phone was right nearby, so one of them answered immediately.
Maida! Okonogi Zoen de gozaimasu. Hai.
Suddenly, the man taking the call stood up with a jolt. He even hit his knee against the desk. He was too panicked to care. Takano dashed into the underground security room in a hurry.
Hai. 午前4時15分、沖宮署内で身元不明死体が R であるということが確認されたという情報が入りました。
そんなわけないでしょ。だって R は風邪で寝込んでいるんでしょ。それはあんたたちが監視してたんでしょ。
そのさんさ、話に続きがありまして、沖宮署の諜報員によると、死後48時間が経過している。
They're just going all in. Takano could feel her blood freezing, starting from her feet. There's a lot of blood freezing in this series, by the way. She couldn't believe what was happening. At least 48 hours? At least 48 hours since the death of the Queen Carrier? Takano couldn't understand.
そんなことありえない。だって。じゃあ村人はどうして平然としてるの？
My feet blood froze again. It's going Nerk. Hope you're doing well.
早ければ36時間の段階で、つまり夕べの時点でかなりの末期発症が出ていてもおかしくないじゃない。
しかし諜報員によると、これはかなり確実性の高い情報とのことで、村への進行上の影響を危惧して現在署内に強い箝口令が敷かれているということです。
確実性が高いって言うなら、あんたたちが見張ってたあの家のフルでリカは誰なのよ。
あのさ、監視体制は完璧です。フルでリカは間違いなく現在あの家です。監視体制が敷かれて以来、彼女が外出したことはただの一度もありません。中にいたことも入江署長が確認なさっています。絶対にありえません。
ならどういうことよ。警察が死体はリカで48時間前に死んだって言ってるのよ。それがデマだっていうの？デマ？そうよ、勘違いかもしれない。だって私の作戦なら、今日の夜私は岐阜県警内の工作員を使って同じ手法で偽装死を装うつもりだったんじゃない？
You can't fake your death. That was my good plan.
これは偽装よ。いやデマよ。何かの勘違いに違いない。
Takano wasn't confused because she was still half asleep. No, Takano was afraid. Her grandfather wrote in his article that within 48 hours of the Queen Carrier's death, everyone in the village would develop terminal stage symptoms. This would mean that he had been wrong. What about everyone who believed his words? What would they think?
失礼します、さんさ。東京の野村様よりお電話です。
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
どこで鍵つけてるのよ、あの女は。私が電話をしている間に大至急沖宮署の死体を調べさせなさい。
現在は非常に困難です。協力員が明朝に出勤すれば 沖宮署へアプローチをかけさせ、確実に状況を確認できます。
その早朝というのは何時？午前5時？6時？大至急よ。急がせなさい。おはようございます。
Hey, hey, how's it going? No, the plan's, it's okay, it's fine, it's fine.
高野です。
All the unit members were gathered at the office of Okinogi Gardeners, which served as a garrison for the mountain dogs in Okinomiya.
ああ、わかった。沖宮署の方が分かり次第、俺とサンサに連絡しろ。それより、R 宅の監視体制だが、R の在宅確認をなぜ怠った？
風邪だったということで、受話器を取らなかったものと思いました。その後、入江所長が訪問し、在宅を確認したため、それをもって在宅確認としておりました。
甘えぜ。R 宅に少なくとも誰かがいるのは間違いないんだな。
はい、それは間違いなく。隊長、R 宅に突入してはまだギリギリ可能な時間帯です。
そいつはサンサの許可がなけりゃできん。サンサも沖宮署の件が判明するまで突入許可は出すまい。突入命令に備えて R 宅監視を増員、8人体制に増やせ。
隊長、今日は境内で祭りがある日です。監視はできるでしょうが、突入はおそらく本日深夜まで不可能です。
うまいタイミングだ。うますぎるんじゃねえのか、こいつは。
Okinogi's rusty yet loud instincts were sounding an alarm. He sensed that someone was attacking them. He sensed the enemy had begun to attack. He realized the enemy had taken the initiative. People usually take a deep breath before they attack. The moment right before they strike is their most vulnerable. Okinogi assumed that whoever his enemy was, they were led by an excellent commander who knew the precise moment to strike.
そういや富武に先日の診療所での会合に欠席したってな。
でしたでしょうか。確認させます。
サンサ、俺に奴がどこに行ったか知らないかとか聞いたのか。
まさか富武兄が。
ウグイスで富武の寝床を確認しろ。こいつは一杯食わされたかもしらんぞ。
さて、もう後戻りはできんぞい。
さて、これで大山明堂して何が出るっすかね。
Kumagai was trembling with excitement.
クマちゃん、私は通信センターの方へ様子を見てきます。ここは絶対に死守してください。
なっせ、死んでも誰も通さないです。
あとのわしの役目はかかってくる電話をごまかすことだの。わしもわしの持ち場へ戻るぞい。熊谷、ここは頼むぞ。
任してください。
Kumagai closed the door quietly and stood in front of it. This was his chance to show Oishi what he was made of. Oishi was on his way to the communications center. All radio communications and phone calls pass through there first. During business hours, each section answers its own phone calls, but they aren't open. But when they aren't open, the communications center answers them instead.
どうですか、こちらは。
はい、ついさっき外線経由が鑑識課の直通番号に1本。
How's it going, John?
相手は
県警本部大高警部です。
おお、大高君か。
The plan! Yes, the plan is unfolding. Oishi grinned. The enemy had started to move. They must have bribed someone inside the police department to be their spy. and he had started to move just as they had planned. Oishi was surprised to learn that it had been Otaka. Oishi had never liked Otaka because he'd constantly boasted about his academic background and always opposed Oishi, who believes underlying on experience. They didn't get along well, and they worked together at the prefectural police
通話が
department.
終わったようです。
じい様に聞いてみよう。ピッポッポッと。もしも、おーっと、大丈夫。私ですよ。いかがでした？
青にさいが生きがりおってからに鼻であしらってやったわ。やっこさん、トサカに来とる。所長の出勤を待って朝一でこっちに直接踏み込んでくるぞ。
相変わらずことを派手にしたがる性分だな。てめえの体一つで喧嘩もできないんですかね。
わしもますますに面白くなってきたぜ。今の電話で眠気が飛んだわ。やはりいるな。お前の言う怪しげな連中がずるずると這い出してくるのを感じるぞい。
Well, things are getting interesting now. What's up next? Hey, demons over there! Come further in!
もしもし、富武です。
おはようございます、富武に。早朝にすみません。山犬に動きがありましたのでご連絡します。つい先ほど山犬の全隊員に非常招集がかけられました。目的は不明です。
そうですか。動きがありましたか。
Tomitake turned on the light next to his bed and put on his glasses as he
それから
answered.
そちらの警察内で妙な情報が流れています。
I believe so, yeah. I think he's the one that got kneed in the nards.
まだ裏付けが取れませんが、女王感染者であるフルデリカの死体が発見されたというのです。
詳しい話を。
収容されていた身元不明死体の身元がフルデリカだったというものです。死後48時間を経過しているとか。緊急マニュアル第34号の発令基準を超えた事態ですが、現在のところHinamizawa地区は平穏が保たれているとのことです。そちらでは何か情報が入っていませんか。
いえ、私は沖宮にいますので分かりませんが、それはありえないでしょう。多分女王感染者の死亡は何かの誤報だと思います。
こちらも誤報を疑っていますが、分析では情報の精度は極めて高く、ほぼ間違いないとのことです。未確認ですが、鑑識課職員複数が証言しているとも。
しかし、
Tomitake realized something. He realized that the Okinomiya police station was Oishi's territory. He also realized that this must be the work of Rika and her friends. Tomitake tried to think calmly. Even if they didn't know who their enemy was, it's obvious the emergency manual is the signal for an explosion, so they must have come up with the idea to destroy that signal. The foundation of the emergency manual is that unless something is done about it within 48 hours after the Queen Carrier's death, all the villagers will develop terminal stage symptoms. So if nothing happens after 48 hours, there is no need for the emergency manual. And with that, the mountain dogs have been called in.
もしもし、未確認ですが、鑑識課職員複数が証言していると。
はい。どうやら現状を考えると、入江機関に不穏な動きがないと断言することは難しいようです。一切に入江機関を緊急査察されるよう進言をお願いします。また最悪の事態に備え番犬部隊への予備命令を進言します。
了解しました。9時になればもっとまとまった連絡が入ってくると思います。山犬造反となればそちらも危険です。
That's a lot of hours from now.
十分ご注意を。
もちろん用心してます。
では次の定期連絡は9時に。
It was 6 a.m. Tomitake would get another call in 3 hours.
ウグイス1より前へ。富武は406号室だ。屋外監視問題ないか。
ウグイス4野外監視問題なし。
ウグイス5フロア問題なし。ウグイス3室内は無音。多分就寝してます。
There was a do not disturb sign on Tomitake's door. Perhaps he stayed up very late last night and was planning to sleep in. This was a great chance for the Nightingales.
生かして捉えろ。三叉のオーダーだぞ。始めろ。
They tried to break into Tomitake's room very quietly. Obviously, it was a simple job for them to pick a hotel room's lock. The two members of the door communicated with each other using a sign language. Even knowing he was asleep, it would be a good idea not to barge in. They opened the door very cautiously and very quietly. The room's interior was organized but tasteless, typical cheap hotels. The only furnishings were a bed, a small desk, and a coin-operated TV. Clearly, only one person could stay in this room. And there was and there in the bed, Tomitake. There was 2 beds in that room. Just saying. Couldn't be found. It was still early in the morning, but the hotel was
どうい
empty.
うことでしょう。富武には野鳥撮影と散策の趣味がありました。まさか早朝からどこかへ出かけているのでは。
いや、違う。こいつは多分やられたぞ。
The do not disturb sign was on the door. With the sign there, the housekeepers wouldn't come in the room, so they wouldn't know if it was empty or not. The sign had probably been there since at least the day before. Knowing that Tomitake was planning to stay for a long period, the hotel never really paid much attention. In other words, the room had been empty since then.
多分奴は襲撃を予見して宿を変えたんだ。
Trust the plan.
それでしばらく姿を現さなかったのか。三佐に緊急連絡。
Okinogi getting mad. He getting mad.
ちくしょう、こっちの作戦が漏れているぞ。
Okinogi realized that he had been beaten to the punch. The foundation of an emergency manual had collapsed, and with this, the basis for the final operation was shaky. Okinogi felt that the major had panicked and rushed into confirming what was going on too hastily. If Tomitake suspected us and went into hiding, then after, caught wind of that, he was sure to come grab us by our tails.
すべてができすぎだぜ。くそ、向こうの計略にきれいに決まっちまったみたいだぞ。
Okinogi tried to calm himself. If he was going to investigate the secret, he could assume that Tomitake was still nearby. The department in Tokyo must be the one conducting the investigation, so he must be waiting somewhere for a report from that department. Tomitake was probably at a new hotel, probably somewhere in Okinomiya.
東京班のカラスに連絡を取れ。おそらく調査部が定期連絡してる相手がいるはずだ。その相手の番号を調べさせろ。そいつが獅子骨市内の番号だったらビンゴだ。
Okinogi was confident about his hunch. But if what he was thinking is correct, that meant his identity was about to be exposed. It also meant his operation had failed before it even started. It wasn't checkmate quite yet. If he could prove that the dead body at the Okinomiya police station wasn't R, then everything would go back to square one. All he had to do was capture Tomitake and check the body at the station. That was all.
隊長、カラスに連絡が取れました。通話内容は確認不能ですが、電話番号だけなら何とかできると。ただし、時間が欲しいそうです。
Yeah, I'll show classic Okinogi again when he's on screen next time.
どの程度？
ほんの数時間ほどだそうです。
ほんのと来たもんか。せかしゃしねえが、可能な限り急げと伝えろ。
It was a little past 6 a.m. It was already light outside, but still too early for the cicadas to start their morning chorus. They had endured the first wave. It was now a matter of how quickly they could recover. Okinogi just hoped that the major didn't throw a fit.
カラスより連絡です。電話番号は調査中。なお、調査部は9時を定時
Take your time, hurry up. Choice is yours. Just don't be late.
あと3時間か。
He looked up at the clock. Even the little things were beginning to bother Okinogi. Every time the second hand moved, he became more impatient, realizing the check-in time was getting closer and closer.
調査部長の岡一佐が番犬に対し予備命令を発令しました。任務は示されていないとのことです。
ってことは、引っ込みがつくような招集ってわけだな。大事でなけりゃ訓練ってことにしてごまかそうってらしい。大丈夫だ。まだ時間があるってことだ。
続報です。調査部長が幕僚長の自宅へ電話しています。内容は不明。
大丈夫だ。大丈夫。まだギリギリ大丈夫だ。
The Bloodhounds' standby orders meant that they saw a very high chance of the EDA Institute revolting. The people on site must be particularly certain of it. Although it's not as difficult to execute the emergency manual, ordering out the bloodhounds isn't that easy. They only did so because they've realized that some kind of trouble is afoot. Okanogi was sure that the people who wanted to conclude matters peacefully were trying to settle things down by saying it was just a mistake. In order to the bloodhounds to stand by without clarifying a mission is like a middle ground in that sense. But the head of the research division called the chief of staff. This was a very dangerous situation for the Mountain Dogs. In other words, the higher ranks of the SDF, or people even higher than them, had decided that the bloodhounds could take the field. The uniforms are hot-blooded, but the suits always push for peaceful resolutions. They still hadn't decided which way they want to go yet. Our loss wasn't certain yet. Win or tie, everything was riding on the same table. If that was the case, the call coming in at 9 a.m. from the research division didn't bode well. Okanogi couldn't say why, but he had that impression. It was just his wild instinct from doing his job. Yeah, that sounds like what's happening here. It sounds like a lot of smoke screening going on. He could guess the people in Tokyo were going to ask Tomitake about the situation in detail and then decide what to do based on that. It was possible that the head of the division, or even the chief of staff himself, might come to the phone. But then the bloodhounds might get an order as soon as the 9 a.m. phone call conversation was over, which would result in his defeat. Tokyo was still unsure. Some were still thinking that it was some kind of mistake, or they wanted to think that it was some kind of mistake. If Tomitake didn't answer the phone, they might send some people immediately, but they wouldn't order out the bloodhounds. There was a chance that it could end in a draw. If they found out that the body didn't actually belong to Arden, although it would corner them, they still had a good chance of winning. But they'd lose the possibility of a complete victory. Okanogi knew that talking to his clients hadn't ordered anything else but exactly that. He didn't want to admit it, but the enemy's surprise attack had succeeded. This was for John. This was for John. This smug motherfucker. So good. And like, manga gamer Okanogi is just like a fucking badass. Dynamic S-curve.
連中はまだ確信してない。疑っちゃいるが、バレ、まだギリギリ大丈夫なんだ。とにかく先に情報を得た方が勝つ。
John's crops are flourishing over here.
俺たちが尻尾をつかむか。確かに初戦の奇襲で徹底的にやられたが、まだ全滅じゃない。だから白旗を上げるんじゃねえ。とにかく待つんだ。カラスが富武の潜伏先を暴く。警察の協力員が R の死亡の真偽を暴く。とにかく今は待つんだ。耐えるんだ。
It's a lot of that energy, yeah.
失礼します。高野三佐からです。相当ご立腹の様子です。
Uh-oh. You don't want to deal with an angry Takano on a phone. You don't want to deal with that in real life especially, but you really just don't want to deal with it on a phone either.
ふしてチャンスを待とうって時に、俺はお姫様のおもりか。あ、もしもし、Okanogiです。
Mrs. Okanogi, Uwu. Hello, Takano. Hi, how are you?
まあそう焦らずに。まだそう決まったわけじゃありませんね。
She's gonna Bible verses at you. Oh no!
まずは落ち着いてコーヒーでも。
Yeah, he's very clearly done. Okanogi tried to change the subject while pretending to laugh, but all he could do was hear Takano's frantic voice. He couldn't even understand what she was trying to say. The second hand on the clock ticked on. Who was going to be able to smile at the end of it all? Today was going to be a long battle. Okanogi's instincts told him so.
お疲れさんです。今のは誰からですか？
今度はうちの花垂所長じゃわい。だんだんと手強くなってきたぞい。
Have a drink from your bottle and calm down, princess.
だが、 わしの敵じゃないな。事務や風情が技術屋に勝てると思ったか。しかし所長が今日所長会のゴルフでよかったわい。直接来られたらちと面倒だったぞ。
ゴルフ場から電話とは仕事してんだかしてないんだか。大高君め、所長と一緒に乗り込みたかったろうに今頃悔しがってるぞ。
間接攻撃でダメなら次は直接攻撃ですかね。乗り込んできますか、大高のやつ。
所長が捕まらないんじゃ自分で乗り込むしかないと踏むでしょう。もうじか8時半か。下の窓口が開く頃だ。
Morning had finally arrived. The chorus of cicadas had begun. That familiar sound would make one think that it was just another day, but it was hardly going to be normal. It wasn't just an ordinary Sunday. Oishi and his men already realized that they were grazing at the tip of a huge conspiracy.
大高君の性分だと多分堂々と胸を張って正面からやってくるでしょう。
自分だけが正義だと思ってるやつにありがちっすね。
わしはここで電話を耐える。お前らはそいつを頼むぞ。
よし、お出迎えで行きましょうかね。クマちゃんはここを頼みます。
The lobby of the Okinomiya police was just like that of any other police station. It could hardly be said to have a welcoming atmosphere. Some of the tiles on the floor were broken and cracked, so sometimes people tripped on them. Those spots were covered by pieces of cardboard, and there was a sign that said, "Caution, watch your step." There was also a pot with a dead plant in it. It was far from a friendly lobby. Unlike hospitals and banks, there wasn't a line of people at the counters of the police station, but there were a few sitting on a sofa waiting for the counters to open. And they would open soon. Some workers were standing by on the other side of the counters. Otaka was snobbish enough that Oishi didn't want to deal with him first thing in the morning. If only he was a pretty young woman with big old boobs! Oishi and his men were on a very important job. If Otaka found out that Rika Furude's death had been faked, the operation was finished. They're only able to shake up the enemy now while Rika Furude's death is still in the books. They had to stall for every minute, every second they could, so Tomitake could seize hold of the tail that was popping out. So if the truth about Rika Furude's death was exposed before Tomitake had that chance, the enemy would recover. The emergency manual would regain its credibility, and although the enemy wouldn't enact it immediately, they would try it again for sure. Rika Furude had detected the conspiracy ahead of time, but that was a miracle. The divine wins. Japan had prevented Mongol invasions twice in the past with such miracles, but nothing like that happened during World War II. They might not be so lucky next time. They might not get another chance. There might be no next time at all. Unless they defeated them this time, they would never win again. While it was possible to do some serious damage, a tied game would inevitably lead to the enemy's victory. They had to completely expose what the enemy was up to, allowing Tomitake to call in a suppression unit to defeat them. That was why Oishi had to stop their vanguard here. His job, therefore, was an extremely important one. If the enemy conspiracy succeeded, Hinamizawa would be destroyed, and more than 2,000 villagers would be executed in a gas disaster. Either way, the incident would never go public. The people's lives depended on him. Oishi was violating his professional duties. However, he had to do what was right. Oishi thought back to when the old man taught him that. Someone who, despite the hot weather, was wearing a suit, came through the automatic sliding door. He had two of his colleagues with him. He was showing off his authority like he always did.
Yo! Ohayou gozaimasu, Otaka-kun.
Oh boy, we are ready for a showdown.
これはおはようございます、大石さん。それから私のことは君と呼ばないでください。もうあなたに君で呼ばれるような立場ではありません。
まあまあ、そんなこと言わずに、大高君。同じ宅で麻雀を打ってよしみじゃないですか？
Otaka seemed disgusted to hear that. He used to boast about being a good mahjong player, but Oishi once beat him badly in front of many people, which hurt his pride. I am in a hurry to aid in 2,000 murders. I need to go.
まあまあそう言わずに、交流剣道大会で少女の筆行委託を忘れちまったと。あんたが私に泣きついてきたんで、こっそりステージ裏で書いてあげたから、無事表彰式ができたんじゃないの。
その件については感謝していますが、今は関係ないことです。
ありゃ、感謝してくれてましたの？な、そりゃ失礼。そういう話はとんと聞いたことがなかったもので、県警では私が書きたいとわがまま言ったから筆行委託を断ってわざわざ書かせてやったんだって話で通ってましたよ。症状の字があまりにうまくないのでどういうことなんだと本部長に聞かれて以来のあなたの言い訳の
Oh yeah, he's drinking it up, wasting every second he can.
どうなんでしょうね。
Just getting under this dude's skin. I love it.
誤解してるんじゃないですか。私はそんなこと言ってませんよ。
県警本部はあなたの島だろうが、あいにくここは沖宮署でね。
Time to throw the weight around.
あんたの思い通りにはそうそうならんってこです。
ほう。それはどういう意味ですか、大石さん。
あんたがここへ何しに来たかは知らんが、あんたの島はゴグラだ。沖宮じゃない。おとなしく引き上げてもらいましょう。
何の権限があってだね。
そちらこそ何の権限があってですかな。
県警本部で現在捜査中のある秘匿捜査事件についてだ。その件に関連があると思われる身元不明死体がこちらにあると聞いてね。
なら電話でお問い合わせを。
なるほど。どうやら鑑識課の連中とつるんでいるようですね。所長から検視報告をすべて県警本部に引き渡すよう命令が来ているはずです。
その件については鑑識から所長に説明が入っているはずです。まだ検視中でね。ちょいとうちのミスで身元が特定されたような情報が内部に流れちまったようですが、ですので報告書を出すにはちょいとお時間をいただかないとならないわけです。
ならその検視に我々も立ち会わせてもらおう。
嫌です。
はあ？私は県警本部の秘匿事件担当として。
それが本当な。
Oh, he's serious now.
私はあんたの刑事魂を疑わない。
Yeah, the Bugs Bunny meme immediately sprang to mind.
刑事魂は高潔だ。そりゃお給料がもらえなかったらこんな商売誰だってやりゃしないです。ですがね、それだけじゃ測れない魂がなきゃ刑事は務められないんです。あんたにその魂があるって私はここを譲りますよ。
The look in Oishi's eyes made clear the anger that was roiling within him. As he looked into those eyes, Otaka recalled all kinds of frightening memories. Otaka didn't want Oishi to sense his fear, but he couldn't prevent himself from loudly swallowing.
そこを譲ってもらいましょう。私も刑事魂でここに来ています。そこをどいてください。
Oh god damn, we're gonna do it!
なんですって。
あんたの刑事魂、私の刑事魂に負けないくらいに思う。
Fucking make me! I love it!
私なんか簡単にどかせちゃうはずです。試してみなさい。
Try me, bitch. Oishi was obviously saying that he had no intention of letting Otaka through. He could. How could he do this? Otaka was confused. Otaka was an elite policeman at the prefectural police headquarters. He believed academic background and performance record were enough to earn trust. He had been working hard under that belief, but Oishi doesn't acknowledge that, and he doesn't even respect him. He's a scumbag. He was the worst type of person, one who tried to establish their meaning and purpose only through rough means, refusing to acknowledge everything about their superiors in order to protect their own pride, and as uncivilized people often did. Otaka had been thinking ever since they worked together, why did people trust in someone like Oishi? Why did people respect someone like him? Why did people appreciate someone like Oishi more than they did Otaka?
今すぐ動かなければ捜査妨害で君を告発することもできるんだぞ。
それはどんな捜査ですか？話してくれりゃ協力もしますよ。
What a good guy!
だから君もわからない人だな。秘匿捜査だから君ごとき田舎署の刑事には話せんのだ。
なるほど。全部話せないなら一部でもいい。
I almost think that, like, as I read that comment from you, John, I started thinking of the RPG Maker Peanut Gallery. That was like it's a fucking comment somebody would leave on this song, and we would be reading it on a podcast.
あんたはその仕事に何を背負ってますか?
John Thayer just became his own fucking material for his own fucking segment. I love it.
何を言ってるんだ。
私はね、背負ってますよ。私の後ろには村の住民の命運2000人分がある。あんたを通せば2000人、いや、その親戚やご家族も含めればもっと大勢の人が悲しむことになる。あんた分かってますよね。
何の話かさっぱりだ。
腹を割ってやる。あんたの飼い主は恐ろしいことを企んでいる。あんたはそこまで想像がついちゃいないだろう。何千人もの人が不幸になる恐ろしい陰謀を企んでいる。そいつがくじかれる瀬戸際だってんで、多分就寝中だったあんたを叩き起こしてすぐに調べろと命じたんだ。いくらの小遣いで頼まれてるかは知らんが、それがあんたの刑事魂より重いってんなら。
Oishi stopped talking there, but his eyes continued to speak after that.
何を言っているのかさっぱりわからないですよ。とにかくそこを通してください。
Otaka's baffled behavior confirmed what Oishi had just said. He had been bought off by someone shady, though maybe he didn't think that he was bought. He probably thought he was just filling the request to confirm Rika Furude's body as a favor for someone in the information network he assumed he had built himself. Of course, the part about it being a classified investigation was a lie, but when an elite policeman from a prefectural headquarters said it was a classified investigation, everyone would grovel and salute him. But Oishi didn't salute him at all.
話になりません。このことは後日必ず所長に抗議させていただきます。
Uh-oh. There. Uh-oh.
話はまだ終わってません。
As Otaka tried to walk by, Oishi grabbed him by the arm. Otaka tried to make him let go, but Oishi was just too strong.
話してください、大石さん。
Now, Keith.
ありゃ、大して力を入れてるつもりはないんですがね。あんたに真の刑事魂があったらこんなのには屈しない。あんたの揺るぎない正義が私なんかあっさり打ち倒して踏み越えていくでしょう。だがあんたはこの程度の腕も剥がせない。なんでかわかりますか？
話せ！
てめえには刑事魂がないからだよ。
Oishi let go of his shoulder and Otaka tumbled to the floor, sliding for more than 2 meters.
これは捜査妨害だ。公務執行妨害、いや、傷害の現行犯だぞ。
Who knew that they could be used for good
緊
someday?
急対応しろ。
Otaka ordered his 2 colleagues around, but they didn't know what to do. Oishi was also a policeman, and obviously there was something more going on between them. Besides, they could sense one thing. Their instincts were telling them that Oishi was far stronger than them. They were no match at all.
どうしましたか、大石さん。
Some officers were gathering in the lobby. They all looked puzzled.
県警の青二歳が筋の通らんことを言い出したもので、ちょいと先輩として指導したまでです。
The officers alternately looked between Oishi and Otaka. They knew something was going on, but they didn't know the circumstances, so they didn't know which one to stop. Oishi was respected by the policemen of the Okinomiya station. Everyone respected him. If Oishi said that Otaka was being selfish, then he must be at fault. Oishi was generally seen as sensible. That's sensible Oishi, that's what everyone thinks. They found the mole, basically, in the police department. That's going to be leaking information to the Mountain Dogs as to whether Rika is actually dead or not. So that's kind of where we're at. We've got the Mountain Dogs kind of scrambling to find out if Rika's actually dead, and we've got Oishi cock-blocking a dude at the police station. And it's going pretty good so far. It sounds like the plan is going off without a hitch so far. All of them thought Oishi would only do this in a public place like a lobby if it was something major. Otaka was feeling humiliated to get such attention. He stood up calmly, hiding his humiliation with anger.
あなたの言い分は分かりました。私も子供の使いでここに来ているわけじゃない。
いい根性です。胸を貸しますよ。かかってこい、青二歳が。
Oh shit! Yo, we just got. Did you see that awesome close up there? We got a big old face full of Oishi there. You are all welcome.
お前はそんなもんか。くそー。
We should.
お前の刑事魂はそんなもんか。俺はひなみざわ2000人を背負ってる。諸葛管内2000人の命を預かってる。ならば2000人を押し退ける気迫で今回や。
Making him cry like a little bitch. It was like watching a match between a sumo wrestler and a small child. No matter how many times Otaka tried to tackle Oishi, he simply crumbled against him. Oishi stood firm as his feet were rooted to the earth. By the 3rd time Otaka tumbled to the floor, he finally realized that he had been provoked. He caught his breath and fixed his hair.
わかりました。ならばお教えしましょう。私が担当している事件は、あなたもご存知の S 号絡みです。
Oh, it does it? Everybody. It's the Sonozaki family, everybody. Everybody! He's investigating the Sonozaki family.
その経由で、とある方面から真偽を確かめてほしいと依頼されたのです。
回りくどい言い方じゃわかりませんな。もうちょいわかるようにお願いします。
何しろ疑われているのは南沢地区では新興上のマスコットともいえる少女の死なのです。それが事実かどうかすぐに確かめなければなりません。
だから電話で説明したでしょ。現在調査中。まだまだお時間がかかります。
いや、言いたくなかったんですよね。この依頼はもう隠すのはやめましょう。あなたの大の苦手の園崎議員からです。
Oh, he's trying so hard. That chance meeting yesterday. Oh boy, that chance meeting yesterday really fucking saved everything.
怖い人。確かに苦手ですね。あの人に凄まれたら私も道理を引っ込めて無理を通すしかありません。
そうでしょう、そうでしょう。その園崎議員から大至急本当にフルで理科の死体なのかどうか確かめてほしいと依頼されたのです。住民の依頼ですからね。住民のための警察です。引き受けるのは当然ですよ。何しろフルで理科はHinamizawaではただの少女じゃない、特別な意味を持つ少女です。その少女の死体が出たなんて話が未確認情報でも流れれば、そうでしょう。
あんた、そういうのは一般の方の耳に入らないところで言った方がいいですよ。ここロビーですから。
これは失礼。
Otaka suddenly realized his mistake. Some people were even whispering behind him. One of them spoke to Otaka hesitantly.
フルでのリカちゃまが亡くなったってのは本当なのか？
ご安心を奥さん。まだそうと決まったわけではありません。それを確認するために県警から参上しました。
そうです。まだそうと決まったわけではありません。現在それを確認中なのでお待ちをと申し上げているだけなのです。
その確認に立ち会わせろと言っているのです。いいんですか？私は園崎議員の依頼でここに来ているんです。その私にここまでの邪魔をしてくれたというなら、それは全て議員に話します。困ったことになるのは大石さん。そろそろ降参した方がいいんじゃありませんか。
Representative Sonozaki is well known in this area as an extremely tough congressman. The people who knew about him continued to whisper. Otaka grinned when he heard them whispering. He realized then that in Okinomiya, his threat was more effective than he thought it could be.
サブローさん、そんなこと頼んだのか？
そこの県警さんや。それ園崎議員さんが
そうです。私が議員から直接依頼されたのです。どうです？大石さん、さすがに降参では。
People continued to whisper. Representative Sonozaki is a big name around here, Otaka thought. Even gangsters give way if someone mentions his name here in Okinomiya.
さあ、議員が怖かったらそこを開けてもらいましょうか、大石さん。
ああ。反則切符の再交付は8番の窓口でご相談を。
はあ？私がいつ反則切符など。
Oishi suddenly started to talk about something completely different. In fact, Oishi was looking at something behind Otaka. Huh? Who was he talking to, Otaka wondered. An old-fashioned elderly man and a lady in a kimono were standing behind him. When Otaka's eyes met hers, she smiled at him. She's definitely my type, Otaka thought.
なあ、お前さ、本当に園崎議員に直接依頼されたんだね。
This is gonna go really well for Otaka, I think.
秘書とかそういうのじゃな
く。そうですとも。こう見えても園崎議員とは懇意な関係でして、ね。
I did not think that in the midst of our ridiculous plan that we are executing on what is to be Hinamizawa's longest day, that we would be hearing this song at any fucking point. But here we are.
直接お電話をいただくこともあるのです。
The elderly man continued to listen with a puzzled expression.
お前誰じゃい？
あ？名乗るほどではありません。県警本部に勤める一警官に過ぎませんよ。
あまりにもできすぎたシチュエーションです。 笑うしかないですな。
なんだ、やっぱりこれは笑ってもいいところなのかい？それは私も気づかなかったわ。
Otaka couldn't understand why Oishi and this lady were
どうしたん
laughing.
ですか？今日はご一緒でお越しになって。
いや、それがね、例の切符なんだけどさ、左折禁止の看板が茂った葉っぱで見えなかったんだよ。その出口に白バイが待ってるってのはちょいとやり口が汚いんじゃないかいって言ったらさ、三郎さんがそれは抗議した方がいいって言ってこうしてついてきてくれたわけなんだよ。
行動の樹木は市役所の管轄ですからね。よくそういうのうちに来るんですが、なんともしがたいんですよね。
それを知りながら出口で待ち伏せとるっちゅうがけしからんと思うてな。こうして抗議に来たんじゃ。
わかりました。そいつは市役所と交通課に私の方から行ってきますんで、今日は一つ穏便に済ませちゃもらえませんかね。
あんたがそう言うなら
I love that Akane is such a fucking Karen. Like, this is a woman that could probably pay 150 fucking traffic tickets a day. And she's here to dispute one. Just because she can. She's got power mom energy, I'll give her that. When Otaka realized they were Oishi's guests, he fixed his tie and spoke up.
違反切符はちゃんと支払うんですよ。規則です。
カチンとくるお人だね。
Yeah, she tore it in half.
カチンとくるお人でしょ。お茶目な一面もたまにあるんですがね。
私は今そこの大石刑事と重要な話をしている最中なんです。
A very mature adult conversation.
お二人とも用が済んだらお帰りを。そして良い一日を奥さん。
ああ、良い一日をね。県警の旦那も。
Grab! Is that a command grab? The two of them grabbed Otaka's shoulders from behind. The lady grabbed his right shoulder and the elderly man grabbed his left. Uh-oh. Oh no!
何かわかるかい？一つは椎茸。
Akane hates shiitake mushrooms. I don't agree, but I respect it.
生まれた時からこいつだけは苦手でね。食うのもダメだし、足を取ったのもダメさ。もう一つは嘘。食わされるのもダメだし、足に使われるのも気に入らない。ここまでコケにされちゃいけないね。
Mushrooms are serious business, people.
石骨の鬼姫、小野崎茜。
Revel in it, fuckers. Revel, drink it in. Admire this spectacle. Otaka, would you like to join us at the Sonozaki residence for some quality basement time?
売られた喧嘩は値引かないのだけが自慢さ。
そのだけのあんたが言うな。あと鬼姫って部分を一市民に置き換えれば完璧です。
は？
The police officers, the citizens in the lobby, and Otaka's colleagues didn't know what was going on.
ご説明します。こちらは園崎茜さん。鹿骨市婦人権友会の副会長さんです。こちらは園崎三郎さん。県剣道連盟の名誉理事さんです。それより前に肩書きがありますね。 獅子骨肉選出の剣技
Oh
園崎
my.
先生です。
Me, oh my.
いやー、お二人とも県警剣道部師範代の大高君に稽古をつけるために本日はお越しくださったんですよね。なははは、朝から本当に申し訳ございません。さあさあ、先生方を道場にお通ししてください。
The dojo is a basement at my residence. There are also implements there that rip off fingernails. Just, you know, a little trivia.
銀さん、なんじゃい。お前さんとは懇意な仲じゃな。今日はとことん付き合ってもらうぞ。
私も久々に燃えてきた。
The two of them were still clinging to his shoulders and laughing meaningfully. Otaka laughed along with them. I think he's about to find out what splayed piggy is, and he didn't even go to the orphanage. Can I just say, the fact that we got fucking slapstick in this goddamn serious ass climax is sending me right now.
確かですわよね。確かに昨日の時点で入江所長は女王感染者が在宅しているのを確認したんですわよね。
在宅を確認なんてひどい。夏風邪をひいたというので様子を見に行ったんです。ですからリカさんの死体が見つかるなんて。
God, what kind of fucking butterflies has this man gotta have in his stomach right now trying to cover for this?
ありえるわけがないじゃないですか。
そうですわよ。ありえるわけがないんですわ。でもそれを確認しないと信じてしまってその誤解する人もいますので。
Yeah, like, man, you gotta give this guy credit. Like, he's in the fucking thick of it with the most dangerous woman in the room right now and her fucking cabal of mercenary dudes that would cut open his throat without a second thought.
誰が何の誤解をするんですか？
そのフルでリカが死んだなどと村に知れたら大変な騒ぎになりますし。
Murder gardeners. Now I'm certain that she is lying. I don't even need to wait to hear from Tomitake-san. Takano-san's objective is the execution of the emergency manual. Its premise is about to be destroyed, and that's why she's panicking. She finally found someone who showed an interest in her research, which made her feel better about herself. Yet that someone is about to cut her off, and that's why she's panicking. She's as pitiful as can be. If it were possible, if there were any way to reach out to her, I would reach out to save her from drowning, but my hand will never reach. It won't reach unless she reaches out. She's drowning, but as long as she refuses to seek help, I'll never reach her. Look at the framing here. Look at the fucking framing here. Takano literally has her own Takano now in Nomura. And, like, Nomura is the one that's pulling her into the fucking muck. This is such smart fucking storytelling. I'm just, man, this is so good. Until she realizes it herself, no matter how much I reach out, she'll refuse my helping hand. However, my selfish imagination will have to stop there for now. Is Rika-chan home or not? If she goes into the details, she'll become suspicious of me. Since I told her I saw Rika-chan at home, that'll put me in a very dangerous position. A man who had been on the phone for some time put down the receiver.
さんさ、電話に出ません。不在のようです。
監視班は何と言ってるの？
いえ、監視体制に入った17日以降、外出の形跡はなく、電話の一本もありません。
ねえ、入江所長。ということは、まだ中にリカちゃんたちはいるということですわよね。
ええそういうことだと思いますがどうでしょう。もうだいぶ治りかけて元気になってますからね。うまく抜け出して遊びに行ってるのかもしれません。ほら、今日は綿流しのお祭りじゃありませんか。リカさんの家の近くには確か模擬店部会の水場が設けられていたはずです。人の出入りも多いですから、監視の方が見逃してしまった可能性も。
どうなの？そんなことはありえるの？
入江所長が出られた後には必ずシールしています。まさか窓から出たのでもない限りありえないでしょう。
山犬はあくまでも R は家を出ていないと、そういうのよね。
そうです、間違いありません。 R は R 宅内です。そして17日以降一度たりとも外出していません。絶対に在宅しています。
それを確認したのが入江所長だけで、山犬の誰一人確認していないのにそうだと言える。
One of the mountain dogs looked up at me. I swallowed, then nodded to him.
ならどうして沖宮署で R の死体が出てきたりするの？
ですからそれは誤報の可能性も。その後の情報では身元不明死体の検視はまだ終わっておらず、フルで理科であるというのは何者かの憶測に過ぎない可能性が高いと。
もうその話は聞き飽きたわ。その怪情報が流れて東京にまで伝わってからもう何時間が経過してると思ってるの？このままでは東京に。
Well, I mean, given the slapstick nature that this chapter is started with, I think we might see that at some point. Takano-san realized that I was standing next to her and shut her mouth. I could already tell what she wanted to say, though. Hey, it's your buddy again! Takano, it's your best friend in Tokyo! Takano! It's your bestie! Takano-san usually has a lot of self-control, but she's not doing so well right now. Even her body language makes it clear how irritated she is. Does she have a habit of scratching herself? Uh-oh. What? As she folded her arms, we could see marks on her nails touched her skin. She's clearly not doing well.
Takano-sanはお忙しいようですね。私が出ましょう。野村さんですか？初めてお電話いただく方ですね。
いえ、サンサー邸ですので。
The mountain dog looked alternately between Takano-san's and my faces.
入江所長、今ちょっと立て込んでおりますの。大変申し訳ございませんけど、所長室にお戻り。
そうですか、そうですね。入江機関の運営はあなたに任せています。私が口を出すことではありませんね。
誰か所長室までお送りして。早く。
She was basically telling me to get out. I left the security room quietly.
もしもし、高野です。お待たせして申し訳ございませんわ。
何度もお電話して申し訳ございません。いかがですか？沖宮署の情報については確認できましたか？
Again, I want this woman to talk to someone else nonchalantly about my murder. Man, she's so good.
申し訳ございません。今急ぐように指示をしているところです。すでに内部協力員を沖宮署に向かわせましたので、その連絡を待つだけなのですが。
そうですか。ではもうじきですね。では何時頃までにこちらにご連絡をいただけますか？
もちろん分かり次第すぐにご連絡申し上げます。ただそれがいつになるかはお約束が難しいのですが、大至急、急がせておりますので。
Ooh, she's losing it.
サンサ、飛行機に乗ったことは終わりですか？
Oh, this is a good train of thought.
もちろんですわ。
飛行機が離陸するために加速するとき、この時に大きな出力を得るためエンジントラブルを起こすことがあるのだそうです。その時まだ大して速度が出ていないならブレーキをかけ離陸を断念するそうですが、4発の旅客機ならうち1つのエンジンが壊れていても飛 飛行は可能ですから。それはもちろんこの度の作戦も同じです。エンジンは一つではありませんから、十分な速度が出ていれば離陸に踏み切るでしょう。後のことはどうとでもなります。ですがこの度の作戦という飛行機はまだ十分な速度どころか、これから離陸しようという段階です。お分かりですね。
The first step of the operation was Tomitake's assassination. That hasn't even happened yet, so what Nomura was saying was
も
correct.
しあなたが乗った旅客機が離陸前からエンジンが故障していると分かったらどうしますか？降りるでしょう？同じことです。離陸前からエンジンに故障が見つかったため、乗客であるクライアントたちが飛行機を降りたがっています。
If they were already at the point of no return, then a little mistake wouldn't matter that much. But since they're still before that point, they're overly cautious about even a tiny mistake.
それが本当に故障なのか、今点検させているところなのです。
ええ、存じています。
Hey, it sounds like keeping the boy alive is still a major keystone of us being able to win and stop her.
あなたは管制塔の管制官。私は彼らをなだめる添乗員。離陸の見込みの薄くなる飛行機から降りたいと言い出すクライアントたち、そんな彼らを懸命になだめているところです。これ以上事態の改善が遅れると、この飛行プラン自体がなかったことになります。高野さんさ。それはつまり、あなたの祖父の論文が世まいごとの打分俗文であったと烙印を押されることですよ。
Just going for the jugular.
一人の少女が死ぬと村人が全員錯乱する。バカみたい。何を根拠にそんな世まいごとを。この分厚い研究結果は全てそんな空想論文だ。なんて。
I want to explain all of my good ideas to this fine lady and have her laugh at them and mock me.
高野ひふみと高野美代って何なのかしら。おかしいおかしいおかしい。
Wow! Takano ground her teeth. She squeezed the receiver so tightly her knuckles went white.
となってしまいます。お分かりですか？これはあなたとあなたの尊敬してやまないおじいちゃんの名誉を守るためでもあるんですよ。
ええ、お気遣いをありがとうございます。
安心してください。私はあなたの唯一の味方です。
Like I said, she's Takano's Takano.
あなたにとって一番幸せに報われる結末になるよう最後までお手伝いします。ですので、どうか私の顔も立てて沖宮署の動向を確かめてください。私も努力してますけど、機嫌を損ねるクライアントの皆さんのお相手は楽ではないもので。
ご迷惑をおかけします。もうしばらくだけご猶予を。ええ、はい、失礼いたします。
Takano made sure that Nomura hung up first and then hung up herself.
おこのぎから連絡はまだないの？電話して。
さんさ、つい10分前に情報が入ればすぐに連絡してくることになっています。少しお休みになられては。先ほどのコーヒーも。
Why don't I break your fucking neck is probably what she's about to say right now. Why don't I take a break? Why don't I break your fucking neck? The unit member tried to serve a cup of coffee to Takano, but she knocked it aside. The cup fell on the floor, making a black puddle. Everybody in the security room went silent.
何よ。ボケっとしている暇があったら誰かモップでも持ってきなさい。10分前に電話してても構わない。もう一度かけて催促して。沖宮署の死体がフルで理科ではないという裏付けと 行方不明の富武の確保よ。
Takano was starting to realize something. By now, she could sense that there was something behind Tomitake's disappearance. Tomitake must know something about what's happening at the Okinomiya police station. He might look dumb, but he somehow found out about the plan and he was trying to mess with Takano. So Tomitake was clearly behind all of it. Takano had been intending to let him enjoy the festival that night if he behaved. The quickest way for Takano to be certain of what was happening would be to see Rika Furude's face at her house. But she couldn't leave, and she couldn't trust Irie. And because there were too many people around for the festival, the mountain dogs had their hands full. If she would answer the phone, that'd do, but she wouldn't answer. That meant the house was empty, and that Rika Furude's death was real. What went wrong? Who deceived Takano? There was only one person. The only person who claimed he saw her at the house. Irie was the most suspicious person around. Tomitake had left the hotel and was nowhere to be found, so maybe Rika had left her house and was hiding somewhere else. In other words, Irie betrayed her and was in contact with Tomitake?
入江所長に監視をつけなさい。
まさか所長の在宅確認が。どうして所長が。
富武はいつの段階でかわからないけれど、私たちの計画に気づいたのよ。そして宿を脱出し、R も秘密裏に安全なところへ避難させた。私たちはまんまと騙されて空き家を見張り続けてたのよ。
What? I mean, it wasn't exactly empty.
空き家ということはありえま。人影が確かに。
それが R だという保証はあるの？ R じゃない。監視する山犬を騙すために誰かがあそこに身代わりとして留守をしている。そうよ、そうに違いないわ。おころぎに R 宅への強行突入を命じなさい。誰がいるんだか知らないけど、そいつは富武や理科に通じている。
How are you gonna do that with festival planning going on?
そいつを締め上げるのよ。
しかし R 宅への突入は本日は不可能です。 R 宅前は水場になっており、祭りの関係者が常にごった返しています。今日の祭りが終わる深夜までは不可能です。
それをなんとかするのが山犬でしょうが。なんとかしなさい、なんとか。
Do all the things!
なんで私が言うことじゃ聞いてくれないの？
Why am I surrounded by nothing but worthless idiots?
私の言うことは聞けないっていうの？私の上の保護者の言うことじゃなきゃ聞けないっていうの？
Uh-oh. The unit members could only watch in silence. They knew that nothing could what the fuck? I'm having a stroke. They knew that nothing could comfort her. The noise of the phone suddenly broke the silence. Takano practically jumped.
Yeah,
we got good news.
カラスが東京調査部の定期連絡先の電話番号特定に成功したとのことです。電話番号は獅子骨市内。山犬が住所の特定作業に入りました。
富武だ。間違いない。ひばり、腕利きを集めろ。奴は用心してるぞ。抜かるんじゃねえ。白崎はバックアップしろ。
了解。ひばり湾より全範囲へ突入先が特定され次第出動するぞ。全員登場しろ。
くそ、電話会社の協力員はまだか。
調べさせてます。5分です。
It was 8:45 a.m. They didn't know where in Shishibone he was staying, but depending on where it was, it might be too far to get there before 9 a.m. They would have to depend on luck.
バカ野郎、5分じゃねえ、50秒だ。何やってやがんだ。端末に番号を打つだけだろうが。
来ました。住所は市内平坂1丁目のホテルモデラート。交換機を経由しているため部屋番号は不明。
聞こえたな、ひばり。
了解。出動。
Luckily, Hirosaka Block 1 is close enough. Okinogi had been right. Tomitake was hiding nearby. The garage doors of the Okinogi Gardeners opened one after another, and a white van sped off in a hurry.
やらー今度はこっちの番でまさか調査部に俺の子飼いが混じってるとは思わなかったろうよこっちが今度は貴様を奇襲してやるぜ
Hotel Moderato. Despite its name, it had a cheap stained sign out front, a dilapidated business hotel on the outskirts of town, the perfect place for someone to lay low in, that might draw in some guests if they renovated the building into a more modern love hotel, but it was clear that they didn't have the capital for renovations and could go under at any minute. That's the kind of hotel it was. Tomitake was staying in one of the rooms on the second floor. The interior of the room was worse than his previous hotel. It only had a bed and a phone, but that phone was what was needed for most at the moment. If he didn't have to receive regular reports, he would keep changing hotels, which was safer, but he needed up-to-date information from the research division, and his course of action could change according to that information. Moving about unnecessarily might cause miscommunication in case of an emergency. Tomitake never suspected that there was a spy in the research division. The ticking sound of the clock echoed throughout the room. It was almost 9 a.m., but the phone might not ring at 9 on the dot. Tomitake waited in front of the phone patiently. He tried to organize the information in his head so he could answer questions more calmly. At the same time, he kept in mind the possibility of an attack. At that time, he heard a woman scream in the distance. It happened again. He heard another scream. Tomitake got the sense that something was happening out inside the hotel. His intuition told him that someone was checking every single room with a master key. Tomitake opened the curtain a little. He saw several mountain dogs who were blocking all the ways out of the hotel. How long had they been there? Finally, they had finally found where he was. Tomitake could hear their loud footsteps. He heard voices too. This cheap hotel wouldn't have chains on the door. They had no means to fend off someone with a master key. Tomitake could tell where there were around 20 of them. No, maybe there were more. It would be no use trying to fight with them. All he could do was hide. Under the bed? Or in the bathroom? Or at the very least, the ceiling wouldn't open up like in the movies. Should he jump out the window? It was the second floor, after all. It was perfectly possible to survive a jump. They would be expecting that, however, yet this was right on city grounds. If he was confident in his legs, it wouldn't be impossible to outrun them. Tomitake soon heard footsteps outside his door. This was it. He jumped from the window. Of course, there were mountain dogs on the ground waiting for him. They pointed, and about 6 of them started running after him. Tomitake shot up from the position that he landed in. This took the mountain dogs by surprise. He started to dash right after he jumped from the second floor window. Tomitake was prepared to do something like that. He had been training in case of an emergency just like this one.
標的は裏通りを西に向かい逃走。制圧しろ。
白鷺了解。白鷺234。そっちへ行くぞ。来たぞ。やつだ。
3 members of the mountain dogs jumped out from behind the streetlight and stood in Tomitake's way. They prepared to stop him, but Tomitake kept running at full speed. They quickly realized he wasn't running towards them to knock them down. He was trying to run past them. There was no point in them taking a fighting position. They lowered themselves and tried to tackle him somewhat simultaneously. Tomitake jumped over them! He jumped over them like an Olympic athlete leaping over a hurdle. But he wasn't an Olympic athlete, and they weren't hurdles. Tomitake's heel struck one of the dogs. The 2 flanking Tomitake thought they'd seized a hold of him. However, as he flew over them easily, he grabbed onto 2 of their heads and smashed them against each other. Tomitake knew that this wouldn't stop them, but at least he'd gain a little time to run.
標的西側都市線を突破。追跡中。バカ野郎、何やってんだ。白鷺10。車両で回り込め。2つ先のブロックを左折で9時方向に奴を捉える。大丈夫か。くそー。 逃がすな。の野郎、なんてバカ力だ。くそ、鼻血が止まらねえ。
Tomitake saw a van with its door wide open ahead of him. It couldn't stop in time, and it hit the wall. As soon as it stopped, several mountain dogs jumped out of the van. Tomitake saw 5 men ahead of him, but he didn't think that those 5 could stop him. Why do trains sound their horn at people on the rails? It's not because the train would get damaged, it's because the people will get hurt. He yelled at them like the horn of a train. He wasn't warning them because they were in his way. He was warning them to move so that they didn't get hurt.
こっちはこれだけ人数がいるんだ。体重だけ見たって奴の5倍だぞ。それで押しかけてもなお奴を止められないってのか。ありえない。ありえねえ。絶対ここで止めろ。かかれ
！Tomitake didn't grin. After all, trains don't grin. Lesson learned, everybody! Trains don't grin! If you take anything from the entirety of this series, that is the one thing that I want you to take. Trains don't grin. Go! We even get a nice big chest close up of our boy Tomitake.
富武の確保に成功しました。
本当？あっさりだったわね。いろいろと聞きたいことがあるわ。殺しちゃダメよ。こっちへ連行して。どうせ殺すけど、彼には似合いの死がすでに用意してあるんだからね。
The phone continued to ring inside of Tomitake's empty hotel room. Within 30 minutes, Tomitake was dragged through the back door of the EDA Institute wearing a gag and handcuffs. Tomitake didn't even move as though he was sedated. The Mountain Dog members carried him out of the van. EDA saw Tomitake from his window and came out of his office in a hurry. Takano was already there.
これは何事ですか、高野さん。
Oh, I'm getting a bad feeling about this. The Mountain Dog silently glared at Irie. He realized that he shouldn't have left his room.
二郎さんの姿が見えないと思ったら、なんと末期発症をしていたのです。
I haven't seen my boyfriend in a while, so I did the logical thing and sent an entire unit of highly trained military dudes and mercenaries to go find him.
不審に思い、山犬たちに探させていて正解でした。
末期発症、富武さんがですか？
Of course, Tomitake didn't reply. Irie decided not to say any more.
そうですか。それはとても。すぐに治療薬を投与してください。
もちろんですわ。投与の間に合う段階だといいのですが。
Irie already knew. The Mountain Dogs had tracked him down. Irie wasn't sure if Tomitake was able to arrange something with Tokyo. He wasn't even sure if the Bloodhounds had been called in. He could guess that Tomitake didn't have time. If the Bloodhounds were called in, the Mountain Dogs would catch that information. And if that was the case, they would likely drop everything and run. But Tomitake was captured, and they brought him back to the Institute. That had meant it hadn't gotten that far, and they were still trying to fix the damage. In other words, Tomitake wasn't able to do what they had hoped for. Be right back in a second. What were they going to do to Tomitake? Since they brought him back alive, they were planning to torture... Were they planning to torture a confession out of him?
That would be very dangerous for him. He'd likely end up dead. Irie realized that he had to do something in Tomitake's place. The main reason why Irie had to rescue Tomitake was because he had no way of contacting Tokyo on his own. Takano wanted Irie to be useless, so they never told him about how to get in touch with Tokyo. Irie could receive phone calls from Tokyo, but he could only call them through Takano. Therefore, Tomitake was the key. Unless Irie rescued him, they couldn't possibly win. But Irie wasn't like the mountain dogs. He was simply a researcher. There was no way Irie could rescue Tomitake from such a high security area. There were 8 mountain dogs in the building. There were usually only 2, but Takano had called in more. Of course, the basement was a highly secured area and one needed an access card to get in. The card was only given to people in Irie's position. In addition to the access card, one would need a fingerprint match as well. The access card alone wouldn't do it. Therefore, the only person who could rescue Tomitake from the high security basement was Irie. So, even if it was impossible, Irie had to do it. Irie bunched up his hands into fists and held them tight to encourage himself, but he only noticed that his fists were shaking. Oh, hey! Irie, did you forget? Irie remembered what Akasaka had told him.
ただ、自らの危機を図るのはとても難しいことです。まだ大丈夫、多分大丈夫などと思っているうちに連絡、少しでも嫌な予感がしたら緊急時と判断していいでしょう。陰謀の度合いから考えて敵は私たちを生かしはしません。くれぐれもご用心を。
Irie felt the cold sweat pulling on his back. Was this the emergency Akasaka was talking about? Well, it seems pretty fucking desperate to me, Irie. Jesus Christ. He shouldn't think that it was still okay. He might lose his chance to run. He realized that trying to do something by himself was foolish. He had a security access card, true, but that didn't mean that he could rescue Tomitake by himself. Just like how everyone else was trying to combine their efforts, he should also ask for help. Also, Tomitake was in their hands, which meant that the mountain dogs had realized they were under attack and were preparing to counter. It was very possible that they were suspicious of Irie too. Once they broke into Rika's house, Irie's lies would be exposed. Indeed, this was the emergency Akasaka was talking about. Irie had realized that. He was already in danger. He needed to leave immediately. The Sonozaki residence was their gathering spot in case of an emergency. His allies were congregating at the Sonozaki residence. He should explain the situation to them and think about how to rescue Tomitake. Takano probably wouldn't kill Tomitake immediately. She was intending to kill him that night as the 5th year's curse, so there was still a little time left. He had allies, and with his security access card, there was still a chance to rescue him. Irie had to let Akasaka know that he was escaping. If they became suspicious of Irie, they would check the house, and Akasaka would be in danger too. In other words, it could cause a chain reaction. Irie didn't miss his last chance to escape, but he still had to do his final job. Irie picked up the phone on his desk, called Rika's home number, and left. It would continue to ring like that, sounding the emergency signal. Irie thought back to when he wondered how long he was going to stay in this director's room. He never knew this day would come so suddenly. He noticed the framed picture of his parents on his desk. Irie had become a doctor so that he could clear up the misunderstanding between his parents and regain his family ties. But how did he get involved in something like this? No, he would return. He would return and continue the fight against Hinamizawa syndrome. He vowed to himself that he would never abandon that responsibility. Irie said his final goodbye and left the director's office.
さんさ、所長室の内線から外線へ通話中です。電話番号は R 宅です。
え？どういうことそれは？盗聴できるの？
もちろんです。ここでもモニターできます。
One of the members flipped the switch. There was the sound of a ringtone.
このタイミングで入江所長は何をあの家に電話しようというの？
やはり R は在宅していて、富武を捕らえたことを連絡しようとしているのでは。
ありえないことじゃないわ。聞かれてるとも知らずに。
What was Irie going to talk about? Takano waited patiently to eavesdrop on a conversation, and there was nothing but a ringtone. It had been over 30 seconds. There was no answer. Nobody was home.
所長も根気がありますね。必ずいるはずだという強い確信があるのでしょうか。
さんさ、裏口のモニターカメラに所長の姿が。
The black and white quad display monitor showed Irie running out the back door.
じゃあ、誰が所長室から電話をしているの？
Takano became utterly confused, but the ringtone continued. It couldn't be. Takano finally realized what was going on.
罠よ。奴は私たちが監視しているのを知ってて、わざと空電話をかけて油断させた。入江は裏切り者の仲間よ。捕らえて。
一回保安室。入江所長を制圧せよ。標的は裏口から職員駐車場へ。
The two mountain dogs who were playing cards in the security room on the first floor jumped into action. The security room was located next to the back door, so Irie was well within reach. Irie had made a serious mistake. He could have left the clinic during the 30 seconds Takano and her men were listening to the ringtone, but then he got to the parking lot. He realized he forgot his car key on his desk in the director's office, so he had to go back and get it. It was only at this point that he realized he shouldn't have gone back. He could have escaped on foot, but Irie wasn't used to emergencies, unlike Akasaka. It was a typical mistake any normal person who had never gone through anything dangerous would make. Although he made mistakes, he didn't forget to call Akasaka. People usually become extremely clumsy when they're in a rush. All he has to do was turn the key, but he couldn't even do that smoothly. He kept turning the key, and finally the engine started. Irie still thought that he was all right. Even if one of them questioned him, all he would have to do would be say that he was going out to get something. When he released the handbrake with his sweaty left hand, he saw two of the mountain dogs dashing out the back door. As the two of them looked around, Irie's eyes met with one of theirs in the rearview mirror. He pointed at Irie's car, and the two of them started running towards it. The two of them looked extremely serious, and certainly not like they were chasing him to return a dropped pin. Irie's body was soaked with sweat. Before the two of them could jump into the car, Irie stomped on the gas pedal and the car took off, spinning its wheels. Of course, the dogs didn't give up. They got into their own car and started the chase after Irie.
保安より本部。所長は車両で逃走中。強制停車させますか？どうぞ。
さんさ、高野よ。おそらく行き先は古出神社ね。神社に行かれたら今日は人だらけ。捕らえる多少の怪我も構わない。行かせてはダメ。
Fuck it! He's just like, fuck it, I don't care. Kill the motherfucker if you have to.
保安了解。これより強制停車に移る。念のためバックアップを送れ。どうぞ。
本部了解。ウグイスをバックアップに送る。だがバックアップは待つな。直ちに制圧せよ。
The mountain dogs had Irie's car in their view as it ran away at full speed. They have to find a perfect spot and timing to stop him. It's not easy to drive a car when you're in a rush. Of course, the more you step on the gas pedal, the more speed you gain. But when you're in a hurry, you can't control the steering wheel well enough to escape quickly. Irie could see his pursuers in the rearview mirror and was completely distracted by that. He was driving carelessly. His driving was so reckless that he could easily get into an accident on his own. As the fear was driving him into confusion, he made a wrong turn. And that mistake made him even more confused and panicked.
町長、そんな運転じゃ危ねえぞ。一発で免停だぜ。
Although the two guys were ordered to stop him, they were starting to think Irie is going to get into an accident without them doing anything. They'd rather not drag this into a car chase if they didn't have to.
こちら大鳥1、聞こえるか？隊長だ。こちら保安車両。現在追跡中。現在地は5丁目付近林道。詳細な位置は不明。
本部要請につきバックアップに向かっている。到達予定は15分後。こっちは当てにするな。俺だって間に合うわけねえと思ってんだ。
Okinogi grumbled. He had to leave Okinomiya in a hurry and respond to Major Princess. But because of the distance, there was no way he could get there in time. Even so, he was still ordered to provide backup. He could have explained, but the princess wouldn't have listened to him anyway. The mountain dogs who were there with Okinogi smiled bitterly.
追跡の方角は
最悪の場合、町の方へ抜けます。
そいつは許すな。山狩りはしてやる。足を破壊しろ。そこに人目は？武装は？
両脇は深い森林です。人目はなし。武装は保安車両常備の短期間銃が1。
The guy in the passenger's seat reclined it and climbed into the back. He lifted one of the seats and took out a black machine gun. The paint on one of the corners was coming off and the shiny silver metal was exposed. It was a machine gun, but it didn't look as powerful as an ordinary one. However, once the dog extended his shoulder stock to set it in place, the weapon looked far more vicious. The man in the back seat looked at the uniquely shaped gun barrel. It was thick and long.
サイレンサー付き。
発砲許可。フルバーストでタイヤを破壊しろ。
保安車両了解。攻撃する。
To get the big Ron gun. The guy in the back seat opened up the driver's side back window and leaned out the car, his sharp eyes aimed at one of the tires on Idie's vehicle. It was a straight road. Idie's car was weaving, but not enough to avoid a shot. The pursuers had his car in their sights. They were trying to get as close to Idie's car as possible, but they were afraid they might get caught if it overturned. They soon decided that this was as close as they were going to get.
3, 2, 1.
The sound that the machine gun made was a lot quieter than what people would imagine, but its power was unimaginable. One of the tires on Idie's car was cut to shreds and collapsed in a puff of white smoke. Oh, that's bad. Because one of the tires collapsed all of a sudden, Idie lost control of his car. He tried to steer away, but that made things even worse. As it spun, Idie's car drove off the shoulder of the road and slid down the slope into the forest. The sound of trees breaking and a car being battered from every direction disappeared down the slope. The pursuers stopped their car and looked down after it, but the plants were growing so high it was impossible to check from there.
標的車両は斜面を転落。死亡の可能性もあり。これより徒歩で追跡、制圧する。
大鳥湾了解。ウグイスが周囲を探し回ってるぞ。運が良ければ合流するだろう。こっちは相変わらず間に合わん。お前らが頼りだ。頼むぞ。
了解。更新を終わる。行くぞ。
The mountain dogs left their car and headed into the woods without hesitation. And we'll have to find out tomorrow just what that means for the good doctor when we continue Hinamizawa's longest day tomorrow evening, starting at about 6 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to try and go a little longer than we normally go, seeing that it's we're starting a little earlier and all that fun stuff. So hope to see you then.